Now, communication between animals has existed for an extremely long time, even if not as complex as we see in many animals today. Of course, social animals communicate the most with each other, whether that be through body language or verbal cues telling other members of their group to fuck off or to... But I want to talk about the more advanced forms of communication that we see in the animal kingdom, the types that may remind us of ourselves or maybe even show us where our own roots of communication come from. Now let's start with the most social canids in the world, the African wild dog. These guys form extremely close bonds with other members of the pack. They communicate with high-pitched calls and calls that sound like hoots, kind of like an owl's call. But the most fascinating thing about African wild dogs is that they vote by sneezing. When it comes to important matters, the adult members of the pack come together and they vote with sneezes. Now, this is an extremely interesting fact about wild dogs, that they actually have democracy, which can't even be said for a lot of the countries today. No, I'm just messing around. Now, of course, we can't talk about animal communication without talking about dolphins. These guys communicate with clicks, whistles, and something called burst pulses. I'll talk about that last one in a little bit. Now, there's very little that we know about this language of dolphins so far, but there are a few things that we do know, like the fact that they most certainly have some sort of language, since there is repetition in these clicks and whistles. And we do know that in most pods there is a certain pitch of click or whistle that represents a certain member of the pod. The human equivalent of this are names, essentially. Now, let me get back to those burst pulses. These are sort of like sonic pulses that can be used to thwart off dangerous predators like sharks. But it is also used for disciplining their children.
Son, we're not playing. Let's go.
Shut up!
Shut up.
No, I'm sorry.
Now, the language of dolphins is an extremely fascinating topic that can be used to communicate with wild dolphins once we learn how to do that. We can't really do that, however. The only way we can really communicate is by the classic Seaway, the planet Seaway, which is essentially giving them tricks, or giving them treats and teaching them to do tricks. My god, that was hard to get out. But there have been efforts to communicate with wild dolphins through machines that can produce extremely similar sounds that they produce. However, there haven't been any responses yet. Now, another animal that is famous for being able to communicate with each other in extremely fascinating ways are the elephants. Now, these guys have essentially a sixth sense. They can sense vibrations in the ground, and they use this to communicate over several kilometers with each other if a herd member has lost the herd, or if they're in danger and they're far away from the herd, or something like that. Now, what they do is they produce extremely low frequency rumbles that we can't hear with our little petty human ears. But of course, this isn't the only way that elephants communicate with each other. They have certain greet calls, and the matriarch can produce a call that tells the rest of the herd that, hey, like, we need to get the fuck out of here. And also, males have special calls when they're in must. Now, if you don't know what must is, it's essentially a time of the year when male elephants' testosterone just rises through the roof. They become extremely aggressive, and they fight with each other, and they will freak anything that is right in front of them. Sometimes this is bad news for animals like rhinos, but that's a topic on its own. I can talk about that another day, and I'm not even sure if I want to talk about that. So let's go to the next thing. Now, our closest relatives, apes, of course can't speak like we can, but they do use hand gestures. The most complex being produced by bonobos and chimpanzees. These two species have around 70 hand gestures that they can use to communicate with each other, and pretty much all of them have been decoded by scientists. In fact, these hand gestures are so easily recognized by humans that some people have started to theorize that early humans could have used this, or at least used similar hand gestures to communicate with each other. And to take it even further, around 90% of hand gestures that chimps and bonobos used are the same that small children and toddlers use. That is so interesting how similar we are when we look at things like this. I think it's so fascinating. But anyways, let's move on. Now, there is a type of communication that can be sort of similar to ours. They can even be the same ones that we used a long time ago. Clicks, sounds, gestures. But what about the communication that is completely different from what we use? One great example of this are eusocial insects like bees and ants. Bees can use a certain kind of dance to communicate to other members of the hive if they found something new and what they have found. They can communicate the direction of what they found and the how far the thing they found is. If they found a good patch of flowers that has a ton of pollen in it, then it can communicate where it is and how far is it. I can't talk today, bro. I don't know why I decided to record a video today, but anyways. Now, ants are even more fascinating. They mostly communicate through pheromones. They can use these to lead a trail of fellow ants to a food source, to warn them of threats, and much more. However, a new study has found that some species of ants that inhabit Europe and Asia communicate through noise as well. They have a spike on their abdomen that they can rub to produce certain pitches of sounds that can be used as distress calls or all sorts of things. But here is a very fascinating fact. Older pupae of ants can already communicate using this little spike on their abdomen if it is developed enough. Younger pupae can't, since it's not fully developed yet, but they can. But these older pupae can signal things that they want. Food. That's pretty much all that they would really want, I think. So that's what they communicate. Hey, I want food. I'm hungry. Blah, 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 blah. Now, of course, I saved the one that I think is most fascinating for the very last one. Now, dolphins aren't the only cetaceans that communicate with each other in fascinating ways. So do whales. More specifically, I think the most fascinating one is the sperm whale. Now, they use clicks called codas. these codas are rhythmic, and there are over 150 codas that they use. They also use these clicks for echolocation when they go to deeper depths, so that they can see their surroundings. Dolphins also use this, by the way. They also have echolocation, but they also use it to communicate. Now, the most interesting part is that sperm whales can make clicks up to 250 decibels, which is the loudest sound we've recorded in the natural world. It might actually be the loudest sound ever recorded. For reference, a jet engine, when taking off, is around 140 decibels. Some scientists have theorized that sperm whales can actually communicate nearly on other sides of the globe with each other. I'm not sure how that's even possible, and they don't just disrupt all sorts of fish with how loud it is. In fact, these clicks are so loud that they can temporarily paralyze humans or even kill them. Animal communication is an extremely fascinating topic that can be talked about for hours upon hours upon hours. For one, it can give us an insight of our own ancestry and what we used to be like. It can be communication that is completely different from ours, like bees and ants, that use pheromones, chemicals, touching, dances, and rubbing spikes on their back. Not sure how that sounded, but let's just roll with it. Communication can be in the form of things that can travel kilometers, or maybe even thousands of kilometers. It can be whistles, clicks. Chameleons communicate by changing their colors, for example. Birds singing. It is an endless topic that can be talked about all day. And if you want a part 2 to this video, then please drop a like, all that, so that I know that you actually want a part 2. Because I think I could make so many parts about this. It's so fascinating. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. If you enjoyed, like I said, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. But also, have a good day, okay?